Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here. So as Chris said, I'm going to talk to you about my thoughts about the future of the CIO role and the IT function more generally. Now, as Chris outlined, there's a lot of things changing in businesses, and business needs becoming more agile, and certainly my belief is that IT functions also need to become more agile as a result. The role of the CIO and the IT function is something that's actually quite close to my heart. I'm a former CIO, and I now earn a living advising, writing about and speaking about the CIO role. So I have a vested interest in making sure the future of the CIO role is correct. Now, certainly it's my belief that not only is the CIO role and the IT function under challenge, it's actually being disrupted. And if it were an organisation or an industry, we would say IT is currently being disrupted. And it's not hard to see why that is, because the basic model for how we set up and run IT functions, the resources, the processes, the skills, how we manage and organise them, hasn't really changed for 20 or 30 years. It kind of dates back to the days when we had to do a lot of things for ourselves. So we had to build servers, we had to install software, we had to create help desks, we had to do all those kinds of things, which the world has really moved on now. In fact, if you look at even just the last 5 years, how technology has changed in terms of social, mobile, cloud, analytics, things like that, they've fundamentally changed the technology landscape. Yet the IT function is still kind of operating and still sets itself up and runs as if that technology didn't exist. It's still based on client server, it's still based on installing our own Exchange servers and doing all those kind of things. That's the basic premise of our model for IT. But the rest of the business has moved on. The rest of the business wants to use social, mobile, cloud. It wants to move quickly, it wants to be agile. Yet it's certainly my belief that the IT function is not really set up to be agile and to actually provide that service. So I think we need a new model. And I feel so strongly about that I wrote a book about it called Disrupt IT. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is just give you a very, very brief summary of some of the key points of what I think the new model for IT needs to be, and also some steps we can follow to actually manage the transformation from the current model to the new model. So the current way of setting up and running IT functions is what I call a technology and service provider. And this has its origins over sort of the last 20 or 30 years, when the focus of using technology when this model first came into being was largely about controlling and improving what we already had. It was about automating and improving our existing processes. It was about making them cheaper, quicker, faster, more reliable. So it was very much an inward-looking focus. And the style of the IT function back then was very much reactive. We waited for the rest of the business to identify their needs. We would then respond to those needs by building or buying and then implementing something, and then doing the ongoing support and management of that solution. And that required quite a lot of hands-on technical skills. And that's how a lot of IT functions are still set up in that technology and service provider model. But the rest of the business that has moved on. So how the rest of the business wants to use technology is to enable new business models, to enable new products and services to enhance the customer experience. So if CIO and the IT function doesn't also have that as their main focus, they're already out of step with the rest of the business. So in the technology and service broker role, which is the new model for IT, the CIO and the IT function very much has to have the same focus as the rest of the business. Now, automating and improving processes is still important. We still need to do that, but the main focus, where the main energy needs to be in terms of how we use technology going forward, is about business models, products, services, and customer experience. And the rest of the business also wants a far more proactive IT function. He wants an IT function that's going to be a partner, going to be a consultant working alongside them to identify opportunities to use technology, not waiting and reacting to a need. That's one of the ways that an IT function becomes more agile, is where it enables the business to become more agile. The IT function is there and proactively identifying opportunities to use technology to drive value. And that needs a different skill set. It's a far more business-focused skill set, still with a technology focus, but it's also business-focused. So I believe there are 4 core competencies that a new IT function will need. So the first one is architecture. So increasingly we're bringing in services, we need to plug them in quickly, spin them up, use them, test them, pilot, do it wherever we want, move data back and forwards across our platforms. So architecture is a key competence of the new IT function. And managing the delivery of multiple services for multiple service providers in short time scales also requires strong project portfolio and project management. So that's delivery management as a core competence. Data management. Data is key in the digital environment. Being able to make decisions quickly, being able to trial things, being able to know what's going on in your markets, respond quickly to them. So data management is also a core competence. And the fourth one, increasingly buying in services from vendors, means the IT function has to have vendor management as a core competence. So that's what I think are the four core competencies of the technology and service broker model: are architecture, management, data management, vendor management, and delivery management. So not so much focus on the technical hands-on skills that the traditional technology and service provider function would have had. Now what the technology and service broker function looks like in each organisation is actually going to vary quite a lot. It depends on the unique requirements. So what I did in my book was I actually laid out 7 principles to actually guide the transformation, guide CIOs and boards more generally through the transformation process. There are 3 principles which cover the CIO role, 3 cover the IT function, and there's a 7th which actually covers the board and the wider business as well. So I'll talk briefly about the CIO ones, and then I'll talk a bit more detail about the IT function and the board ones. I have some examples of companies that are already doing these kinds of things. But the main message for CIOs is that it's not about being the senior techie anymore. When the rest of the business, when the rest of the C-suite want to talk to the CIO about how they use technology, they do not want to hear switches, servers, routers, hubs. That's not what the language they want to hear. They want someone who can talk to them about business outcomes and business value and creating and generating revenue and customer experience. That's the conversation they want now. And if they don't get that from their CIO, they'll go somewhere else. So it's being less about being technical, less about sounding and acting like a techie, and more about a business leader. But increasingly, CIOs need broader experience than pure IT. To be able to talk with credibility about business models, about products, about services, about generating value, business outcomes, you really do need to have experience in those areas. So increasingly, we're seeing more and more CIOs are either coming from outside IT or already spending time outside of the IT function before they take on the CIO role. And finally, the CIO and the technology and service broker model is a far more social animal, increasingly spending more of their time outside of the IT function, engaging with their internal stakeholders, but also engaging with the external stakeholders as well. So your organisation's customers, partners, suppliers, and other parties that can actually give you that source of innovation, that idea, that spark that the CIO can then bring back into the business. So that's the CIO role. So I'll cover that very briefly. The IT function. Now, I mentioned the 4 core competencies of architecture, delivery management, vendor management, and data management. So it's my view that we need to focus as much of our resource and skills in the IT function around those 4 core competencies, because that's where we're going to add value going forward. We're not going to add value with the hands-on technical stuff as much as we used to do. So that drives quite a sort of drastic change in the structure and organisation of an IT function. And everything else, if it's not a differentiator, if it's not a core competence, if it's not something which is part of how you innovate or how you respond quickly to your market, my challenge to CIOs is, why are you doing it? You're not adding value to it, you should outsource it. But inevitably, as you outsource, as you go through those tests of differentiation and innovation, you will actually end up retaining some IT resource in-house. But again, my view is ring fence it. So if you've got a mobile app which you believe is a differentiator, ring fence the resources that are developing and supporting that mobile app, and go sit those resources with whoever owns that mobile app. So on a day-to-day basis, the CIO does not have to be involved in maintaining it, managing it, and setting the priorities. If your CMO owns that mobile app, let them own it. And it leaves the CIO time to focus on the wider business, on business outcomes, on looking forward rather than looking at today's systems. Now, there are already some organisations that operate like this. So Netflix, for example, their vice president of IT operations said, don't build data centres if it's not your core business. And effectively what he's saying is Netflix is an entertainment business. He wants all his IT resources focusing on being an entertainment business, not on being an IT business. Now they have an objective that by the end of this year, all of their corporate IT will be in the cloud, and they're well on the way to achieving that. And even their customer-facing apps, once they're developed, they go out onto the cloud. They don't run the infrastructure, they don't run the servers, they don't run the storage. Other people can do that. They focus on being an entertainment business. News UK, which publishes the Sun and Times newspapers in the UK, their CIO said last year that Amazon, Google and Salesforce are far more secure than any one IT department. In other words, security is not his core business. Other people can set up and run secure data centers, and the apps that run them far better than he can. Last year, he was promoted to COO in addition to his CIO position. That's because he's got the time to focus on business outcomes and business value. He's not spending his time looking at running today's servers, today's infrastructure. Someone else is doing that for him. And the final company is GPT Group, which is an Australian property business. It manages billions of Australian dollars worth of property, and it's one of the 50 largest companies on the Australian Stock Exchange. They have one AS400 on site. Everything else is gone. In the cloud, third-party data centers, they don't do it. Now, GPT Group recently launched a new business, which is letting office space on very short notice at very short leases. Their CIO and their IT function were a key part of launching that business. And as the CIO said, because they're now solving problems which are far more close to the business outcomes than putting up servers, they're not worrying about those day-to-day things that other people can do far better and quite possibly far cheaper than they can. They're directly involved in setting up and running new businesses as a result. They're adding far more value than they would be if they're worrying about the servers. And then my final principle, the seventh one, is actually saying to the rest of the business, and particularly the board, it's basically saying you get the CIO and the IT function you deserve. So if you treat your CIO like a service provider, then that's what they'll be. Yeah, if you create the space and the profile and give them the support to be a service technology and service broker, then you'll get a lot more value out of them. So the quote there is from DirecTV, which is a US-based satellite TV company, from their CEO. So basically what he's saying is his CIO has a full seat at the table. He's a board member, reports to the CEO. He also says that CEOs need to spend more time with their CIOs to get to know their challenges, what they're trying to do, what resources they need, how they're going to go about it, because in his view, how else can I support my CIO if I don't understand their challenges? How else can I support them if I don't know them? How else can I advise them and coach them? And probably more importantly for any CIOs in the room who've tried to do any kind of change project, how else do I provide them with air cover? Because as CIOs, you drive change, and change is difficult, and you do need air cover from your CEO at times to drive that through. So they're the 7 principles that I laid out in the book to achieve that transformation from the technology and service provider to the technology and service broker. And that's actually quite a long journey, and it could take many years. And so not every CIO has a CEO like DirecTV. So I've also got 6 sort of key steps which any CIO, any technology could effectively start doing when they get back to the office to start that process and to start laying the foundations that move to a technology and service broker model. And the first one is to start the conversation. I said not everybody will have a CEO like DirecTV who just gets it. So you need to start that conversation. You need to start with your colleagues, with the CEO, with the board, and actually, do they share the same vision? Do they want a technology and service broker IT function? Do they understand that model? And while that conversation is going on, because that could be quite a long conversation, there are other things you can do. You need to assess your team. If as a CIO you're going to be spending increasing amounts of time outside of the business with stakeholders, you need to know on a day-to-day basis your management team can run the department, otherwise you're going to get pulled back in. If you're going to manage a major transformation program within your IT function, you need to know you've got a management team that can support that transformation program. And you also need to know you've got managers working for you who are comfortable with migrating from service provider to service broker. As I said, the CIO in a technology and service broker model is far more social. So you need to start developing your network, something you can do straight away. Start building up those stakeholder relationships both inside and outside the company. And you also need to assess your brand. How do you come across? Do you sound like a techie? Or are you a credible business leader? And if you're not a credible business leader, what do you need to do to make that transformation in the eyes of your internal stakeholders? And your own personal development. So we can all take charge of our own personal development. And in terms of building up your knowledge and your experience of other areas of the business, you can do that. A great way of understanding what the challenges facing your CMO is to go to digital marketing conferences and understand the language and the challenges and what's going on, and then be able to contribute directly to a discussion about marketing in your business. And finally, you can't throw away your legacy stuff. Your systems, your infrastructure is there, lots of time and money invested in it. You can't just move to the cloud. What you can do is adopt a cloud and partner first principle. So the next time you're asked to do anything new, the next time you're looking at a new solution, then at least default to cloud and partner first and tell me why you can't do that as opposed to why you should be doing it. So there are 6, I think, sort of fairly practical steps, things that any CI can start doing straight away to start laying the foundations for the move to the technology and service broker model. Now, I don't know if you noticed the slides was basically scrolling up. They fit together as an infographic. So if anybody wants a copy of the infographic version of the presentation, then contact details there, just get in touch with me, but happy to send it to you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ian. Well done.